Hi everyone, I'm Ashwin and I actually won the World Amateur Chess Championship conducted by ACO at Greece in 2018. And I teach a class in Amphy called Lessons from an Amateur World Champion. And today I'd like to show you one of my games from the 2018 Greece event that I won. I'd like to show a lot of attacking ideas in this game on how to conduct an attack, how to find the right weaknesses and concepts around that, right? So the game is basically a 1e4 base game. It's a Sicilian defense, and I'd like to play the Grand Prix variation against Sicilian. So the game started with e4. Black played c5, and the Grand Prix is actually characterized by this move knight c3. And what this does is it controls the d5 square, and it also protects the e4 pawn. And the whole idea is to basically push f4, develop the knight to f3 and the bishop to b5. So those are typical ideas in this opening. And then it's either a king side attack or you try and attack on the queen side once you create a double pawn. And in this particular game, we actually had double pawns on the queen side that I was able to create and make target out of. So Black played d6. My opponent didn't seem very familiar with this opening. I think he was taking a lot of time with each move, so I realized he was probably not that familiar with this opening. And this opening does catch a lot of people by surprise, because typically with Sicilian, the second move that's most common is knight f3 followed by d4, which is the open Sicilian. That's what a lot of club players also play. And I deliberately chose to avoid that because I did want to catch my opponents by surprise, and people are generally less prepared against sidelines, although 2 knight c3 is probably not the best best way to play Sicilian in general, right? So this opening gave me very strong results in the World Amateur Chess Championship. I actually won 5 games out of 5 with this opening, right? Out of 9 games, I had 5 games with white and 4 games with black, and all 5 games with white I opened with the Grand Prix attack, and I won all 5. So that was very exciting. So black played d6. So I went with f4, which is the characteristic third move of the Grand Prix attack. Black played knight c6, and I played knight f3, just developing my pieces, controlling the center. And black played bishop g4. Here he's actually pinning the knight against the queen. And one of the ways to play this is for me to play bishop b5, essentially avoiding or preventing knight d4 as a next possible move, while also preparing to castle. So the key objectives with opening are to develop your pieces, castle your king to safety, and connect your rooks. And that's exactly what I'm trying to accomplish over here. And I've developed most of my pieces except my my dark squared bishop over here on c1. And I feel at this point my pieces are pretty well placed. Black played a6. Now basically he's telling me either I have to go back or I have to take the knight. The thing is, going back, a4 would be a blunder because black can play b5 and then c4, and my bishop over here is essentially trapped, right? And I'm going to lose a piece, and this is probably a lost position for white. So I have to be careful. And what I like to play in this situation is to basically take the knight on c6. Now bishops are slightly better than knights, but here the compensation I have is I'm actually creating double pawns, and then I can essentially make one of them a potential target for me to go ahead and attack. I'll talk about key concepts of attacking in a little bit, but at this point I have traded my bishop for a knight, but in return I have double pawns in the black's camp. And I played h3, trying to push the bishop away, but he took, again giving up his light squared bishop. Now black's advantage is mainly the bishop pair, and I don't know why he decided to give it up. I think these two bishops can combine really well for black, but for some reason he decided to give it up, and I took back happily with my queen. e6, d3, just strengthening my center. d4. Now this is an important position. Here you definitely don't want to take, because black can take back and undouble his pawns, right? So you don't have these two targets anymore. And if I take over here, black can take back, and this is actually it's almost equal from a position perspective. And black is probably slightly better because he's got a strong center, right? I have one less pawn in the center, so clearly black has the slight advantage over here. So when black played d5, I went e5, essentially shutting out any ideas of exchanging, and also preventing his knight from coming to f6, right? So that's another key idea in this position. So he played queen d7, which I think is a slightly passive move, but maybe his idea was to play d4 at some point, and I think he wanted to just defend the pawn on c6. I castled, just finishing my opening objectives. Knight e7. Okay, now this is a good time to pause. So if you look at this position, I think there is one clear weakness in black's camp, which is the pawn on c5, because there are no pawns that are defending it or can defend it, right? So whenever you have a pawn which is not defended by other pawns, it's essentially a weak pawn. And when you want to attack your opponent, you really want to target something which cannot run away from your attack. And pawns and kings are the least mobile pieces in chess. So you either try to attack a pawn or you try to attack the king. So that's usually what attack revolves around, right? So here I'm definitely going to try and attack the pawn on c5. And one way he can actually get rid of the weakness is to play c4 at some point, right? He can play c4 at some point, and that will help him get rid of the weakness. But it on the other hand may create a couple of additional weaknesses if I take back, because the pawn on c4 as well as c6 are going to end up being pretty weak. So I play knight a4, immediately attacking the pawn on c5, and black has to defend it. And not only am I attacking this pawn, but I'm also threatening knight b6. Now this is a classic way to gain initiative. Now the way you think of this move is, when black plays knight e7, you have to make a decision as to whether to develop this bishop, right? I still haven't developed this piece, so this is one thing that I do have to think about. And then I have to start thinking about how can I improve my pieces, right? Towards the area where I want to attack. I still don't have a clear weakness yet, although these two squares and these two pawns could become my potential targets of attack. And the way I come up with this move is essentially that I have this weak square that I can target, I have this weak pawn that I can target, so why not make an attacking move right away with my knight, right? So it's a forcing move, and black has to defend it, and he has to not only defend c5, but he also has to defend the b6 square, and that's why he went knight c8. So now I play b3. The idea behind b3 is I not only want to prevent c4, but I can also develop my bishop and at the same time attack the pawn on c5, right? I can put my bishop on a3 and attack the pawn on c5. So black plays rook here. And I think his idea was, when I play bishop a3, he's going to come in with rook b5. He's going to come up with the rook and defend this pawn, right? That's probably his idea. So I played bishop a3 anyway. Again, an attacking move. He plays rook b5, defending the pawn on c5. So this pawn is now attacked twice, and attacked twice and defended once, right? Sorry, defended twice. So what I do now is I want to do two things. One is I want to push one of the attackers away, right? And at the same time, I want to fix the weakness. I want to attack the pawn on c5, but I want to fix it there so that it doesn't run away, it doesn't move to c4. Black could give up the pawn on c4 for better activity at some point, maybe, but I decided I don't want to let him do that. So I play c4, and the rook now, strangely, went to a5. And this is not a good square for the rook, because if you see, the rook is actually surrounded over here by his own pawn on a6. And this square is unavailable for the rook because my pawn is defending it, and he cannot come forward because my pawn is again defending the knight. So now I have to think again, right? I cannot attack this target any more times. If I bring my queen down, he can always play d4 and block it. So I cannot necessarily attack the target on c4 that easily. But what I could do is shift my attack. Now I want you to pause a little bit over here and think about what I could do. There is a negative consequence to the move rook a5, and start thinking about combining those ideas. I want to continue my attack, but at the same time, I want to try and target his less mobile pieces, which include the pawn on c5 as well as potentially the rook on a5, right? So I would say pause and think for about 30 seconds to a minute over here to see what plan you would come up with, and then we can resume. But I hope you actually did pause the video and think about it. So what I did come up with as an idea is I wanted to come to c1, d2, and then attack this rook over here, right? And in the game, I played bishop b2 because, again, I could attack the rook from here as well, but I knew that he's going to play d4, and that creates yet another weakness in black's camp, because it's going to be an advanced pawn that I could potentially target at some point, and this pawn becomes more accessible. So I had those themes in mind when I played bishop b2. He played d4 as expected. Now I come back bishop c1 with my original plan of coming to d2, right? So black has no choice. He plays bishop e7, giving up the rook. I play bishop d2. He takes the knight. I take back. And now the position has changed quite a bit. Structurally what has happened is I have a couple of weaknesses here, right? But I do have this open file that I should think about how to take advantage of, right? So now I change gears. I'm no longer going after this pawn because it's not easy. I can only get one piece at most to attack it. If I can relocate my bishop over here, there's one piece that can attack this pawn, but it's pretty well defended at this point. So I didn't see much of a possibility with attacking the pawn anymore. So I decided to go. Now, of course, he plays knight b6, and I decided to go rook b1. I just give up the pawn on a4 in favor of more activity for my rook. So he takes, I give a check, right? So my rook is actually reached his territory. It's in the 8th rank, and this can get pretty serious for black very soon. Black goes bishop d8, and now I get my other rook into action. And if you see this, my second rook is ready to come down to b7, and there is no way to stop it. A move like knight b6 does not work because of the pin over here, right? I can simply take the knight. For example, if he moves over here, I can simply take the knight and just win material. So he castled, and I went rook b7, and yeah, this is very strong for white. The queen actually went back to e8, and now again I would probably suggest you just pause and think about what the winning shot is over here. Just take 15 to 30 seconds, think about what the winning shot is, and then I'll show you what I did in the game. Okay, so I hope you took some time to think about it. What you could do over here is basically take advantage of this pin by moving the bishop to a5. So I went bishop a5. He took it. I could just take the queen, and at this point I think he resigned, because I think his initial idea was he would get two pieces, but then he missed the fact that I have queen c6, and I think he realized it after making the move bishop takes a5, giving up the queen, right? And now this wins one more piece, and this is just devastating for black. So it was a pretty quick game, and if you go back to the original position, this is where the game really started, where I'm actually creating a set pair of double pawns in black's territory by exchanging my bishop for the knight. And then throughout my game, the theme was to actually take advantage of this, right? I don't trade to help him undouble the pawns. I attack the double pawn with tempo when I could. I bring more pieces into the attack, and then I prevent the weakness from moving away, right? I blockade it, and then when I find one more immobile piece, I reroute and go ahead and target the other piece, right? And then I eventually win material, whether it's a pawn or winning an exchange. Winning an exchange is definitely better because you're getting something worth 2 pawns, right, in terms of advantage, because the bishop is worth 3 pawns and the rook is worth 5. So I basically change my plans when I see that the weakness has shifted and I can get a better advantage. And now the structure of the position itself changed quite a bit. I have an open file that I could take advantage of, and I simply sacrifice a pawn to just get my rooks in, and there is no way he can retreat. So once he castles, just rook d7, and then take advantage of this. And I think, like I said, he missed the fact that there is queen takes c6, right? So I hope you like the game. This was my second win in the event, my first convincing win, in fact. I will show you my first round game in a future video. So this is essentially the third round where I won, and I won in a convincing way. And this actually was a huge confidence booster for me. Thank you, and thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.